that's a message to me that there is this healing cosmic nature that we need to explore as we respond to art and this. So it brings a very different insight to darkness and Black. And I think that is very important during our times, particularly now, because we are globally going through incredible birth pangs right now. And also there's no lack of pain and suffering. It doesn't matter where you are right now. And I'd say even the people that are causing all the pain and suffering, they're struggling. So it's a difficult time. And I think exploring darkness in a very profound and cosmic way can orient us in a very healing gesture to the challenges that are facing us during this time.
Welcome to Anthroposophical Conversations, the podcast where we explore the transformative teachings of Rudolf Steiner and engage in insightful discussions with individuals studying anthroposophy.
Welcome to Anthroposophical Conversations with me, Telana. Today we sit down with Stephanie Georgieff. She is an anthroposophist, a member of the Christian community, a naturopath, and is currently serving with the International Fellowship of St. John in Bulgaria, where she manages the safe house for Ukrainian refugees. She is also an author and written a number of books to do with the Black Madonna. And today we're going to talk about how do we be with darkness, to transform it within ourselves and the world around us so that we can compassionately use our will to make a difference in the world today. Well, welcome, Stephanie, to Anthroposophical Conversations. I've been looking forward to chatting with you today because we are exploring a very dark subject, darkness. But just start off by telling us the story of how you came to find anthroposophy.
Oh, the brief story is when I was attending naturopathic school. There was a study group with some Europeans. This was in Oregon, the state of Oregon. And we had some Europeans, specifically from Holland and Germany, that had a study group in anthroposophical medicine. And I was completely unaware of this term. I had never heard it ever. And I thought, what a great word. It's just the word. And I went to some of the study groups and realized that I really needed to understand the philosophy before I could understand the medicine. And Portland, Oregon is a wonderful, wonderful center for all sorts of things, but they also have a very lovely anthroposophical branch there, and they have a Waldorf school, and they have excellent bookstores. And so I was able to start indulging in that. And then after I finished school, I went off to Europe to study for a while. And then when I came back to Southern California, the Los Angeles Anthroposophical branch is also phenomenal. And they also have a Christian community there. So I became involved with both of those and was deeply enriched by the experience. And after a while, decided that I should join the first class. And I also joined the Christian community in membership. And that's how I found anthroposophy.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So your interest in medicine and healing,
yes,
the natural way led you there. And then I think you're very involved still in the Christian community in that. So just bring us up to today briefly, like where
Sure.
are you now in the world and what are you doing?
Well, right now I have the privilege of serving with the International Foundation of St. John. And they're located in Bulgaria, Southwest Bulgaria, and I've been in a safe house with Ukrainian refugees. And that's been just a mind and heart warming experience, the entire thing. And my history with the Christian community is I've served on the regional board for North America and been very supportive of the seminary. And then most of my speaking tours all over the world, literally, have been through the Christian community. So I've addressed numerous regional and international conferences for the Christian community. And then I've had the privilege of visiting all of the congregations in North America and many of the congregations in the United Kingdom and Ireland. And so I consider myself a little bit of a fangirl of the Christian community. That's like, it's my little bucket list. I want to visit everybody. And so I've had the privilege of visiting numerous Christian communities in Germany, but I will be shortly visiting the communities in both Johannesburg as well as Windhoek in Namibia. So I get to mark those off on there.
Yes, and we look forward to having you here.
Yes.
So maybe just to put into context for those that are new to anthroposophy and maybe finding this podcast and that, just what is the Christian community and how does it relate to anthroposophy? To the philosophy?
Yes, they're very separate movements. And the founder of anthroposophy was very specific, saying anthroposophy is a philosophy, it is not a religion. And the Christian community is based on anthroposophical Christology. So there is an approach to anthroposophy that embraces Christianity and has a very unique approach to Christianity. And if you ever have the honor and pleasure of attending a service, some people in their first experience, and it's called the Act of Consecration of Man, and it's essentially a communion service. And people will say, well, this feels like if Buddhism and Catholicism had a baby, and then they had this, because it's very meditative. And I find it incredibly healing, actually, to go into the service. And the anthroposophical approach to Christology and Christianity embraces many streams from other faith perspectives. And that's why people in traditional Christian sects may say, oh, that's not Christianity. And we can respect differences of opinion. But the largest difference is that the Christian community and anthroposophical Christology accepts reincarnation and the fact that divinity evolves and is reaching out to humanity. And we're going through all these different periods of evolution together in order to be fully mature as human beings, but also the spiritual world. And so they embrace the Bible, as all other Christian sects embrace it, the Old and the New Testament. But their approach to scriptures is what I would call extraordinarily esoteric, meaning in some of the Protestant sects, they're very literal in their interpretations of scripture. And I say this sect is very literal in its esoteric interpretation of the Bible. So we'll say, oh, yes, that verse means whatever. And it's like, but it not only is this on a physical level, there are many different levels that these verses can be understood and conceptualized. And so for me personally, I enjoy and am enriched by all approaches to Christianity. I enjoy the evangelism and the social justice aspect of many of the Protestant sects. And I love the ritual and mysticism that you find in Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy. But the deepest, for me, the deepest conceptualization of this miracle of Christ incarnating on earth, to me, is held as much as we can hold it with human consciousness on earth by the approach in the Christian community. And that's why I embrace it. And unfortunately, we don't have any congregations here in Bulgaria, but the closest one is there's two of them in Poland. And so I'll be visiting them at some point in the not too distant future.
Great, thank you for that explanation. So that gives us a bit of a context and background to how you've written some books about the Dark Madonnas, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But before we go there, maybe it's just we wanted to talk about darkness in the world today. So how do we even start exploring this concept of darkness?
Yes, it's such a fascinating concept, and especially nowadays, we're living in such polarized times, and there's this undercurrent in global culture of coming to terms with our pasts. And obviously in South Africa, there's a lot of that going on. And I can say, as from North America, particularly the United States, we're having to deal with a lot. And some of it is considered dark. And if you go into a Bible in the concordance and you look up these different words, and if you look up dark or darkness, you get all these really what I would call negative verses, something to be feared, something to not enjoy. It might embody evil. And I think a lot of those interpretations of darkness have colored culture, pun intended, to view dark in a negative way. And so people whose melanin content is larger than other people, and if they have dark skin, either it's brown or very dark black, they're seen in a negative light and they're negated in terms of their value. And something that I found, my first book is on the Black Madonna. And I always say I'm a card-carrying anthroposophist, and I'm also an evangelical anthroposophist. It comes from my Protestant roots. And there's a wonderful quote from Steiner that says, art is the method by which the gods speak to humanity. And it's basically, art is a way that the spiritual world conveys messages to humans. And so when I was delving into my study of these dark Madonnas, obviously you have to deal with this color, right? And there was a scientific research study that was done in the 50s, and they were looking at dark Madonnas in Europe. And they said, oh, they're made in Africa, and that's why they're black, or they're dirty because they've been in candle smoke for 1,000 years. And then the third category, we have no idea why they're black. And then they put this little addendum in, that's the largest category, which I found hilarious. Like, there's your thread, look there, over there, not just lovely black artists are making images that look like themselves, or we need to clean these things up. It's like, well, the largest category, we don't know why they're dark. And so that was intriguing to me. And being a card-carrying evangelistic anthroposophist, I look at history, I look at everything, and then I say, well, what's Steiner saying about this? And what Steiner was saying was incredible. And so if we have these images that are dark and they're bringing messages from the spiritual world, they're dark for a reason. And they're not dark, in my opinion, because I have this oracle to the spiritual world, but my interpretation of what I am hearing, the spiritual world, is inviting us into these really cosmic healing natures of darkness and black. And in my opinion, one of the things that these images are saying, no matter where they are they in Europe? Are they in Africa? Are they in the Americas? Are they in the Pacific Islands? And that's where we have dark Madonnas all over the place. That's a message to me that there is this healing cosmic nature that we need to explore as we respond to art and this. So it brings a very different insight to darkness and black. And I think that is very important during our times, particularly now, because we are globally going through incredible birth pangs right now. And also there's no lack of pain and suffering. It doesn't matter where you are right now. And I'd say even the people that are causing all the pain and suffering, they're struggling. So it's a difficult time. And I think exploring darkness in a very profound and cosmic way can orient us in a very healing gesture to the challenges that are facing us during this time.
Sure. So how do we then explore that on another level? Because I know you spoke about divine darkness.
Yes.
In our prep for this.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is it about us? Like, now I'm just don't know where to go with that. Like,
Yes. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because there's so many streams from darkness. Yeah. And one of the really profound ways of looking at darkness is from some of the very first theologians of Christianity that were directly related to the Apostle Paul. And we can read in the Acts of the Apostles of one of the first initiates of Paul is called Dionysius the Areopagite. And he basically debated Paul in the Areopagite, which was sort of for stand-up philosophers in ancient Greece. And people were intrigued with what Paul was talking about. And so they said, hey, come and debate. Let's come and debate. Tell us what you're talking about. And he was so convincing that he actually converted this philosopher of ancient Greece, Dionysius the Areopagite. And Dionysius started articulating many of the things that we take for granted in terms of Christian theology. And one of them is the angelic hierarchies. And another one that we're much less aware of is called the theology of divine darkness. And what Dionysius is saying is that in darkness, when our sense of sight is diminished, is where we embrace divinity the most acutely, because we're not being distracted by the material world. And so this concept of divine darkness is actually quite rich. And it's not something to fear. Darkness is not something to fear. It's something to embrace, and also to try and sense the divine. And when you talk to different people who have been through very difficult periods, and even people who have been isolated, what they say is that when they are isolated and their senses are basically deprived, the thing that brings them sustenance and also is very quite revealing to them is being in this darkness, so that they can really have this direct relationship with divinity. And when we look at all the great spiritual traditions, including Christianity and the monastic traditions, and even science was saying a few years ago, the natural sleep patterns for humans is to sleep in blocks. And so people would go to bed with the sun, but they would wake up in the middle of the night and they would have a couple hours, and that's where they would tell stories and they would pray and they would meditate. And in the Christian tradition, the Christian monastic tradition, the hours between 1 and 3, that's when they would get up and they would chant during this time. And there's a lot of cultural and historical evidence that says that most of the scriptures, regardless of tradition, that's when they were written, was during this time, because that's when, nature is asleep. The activities of the day are done, everything's done. And there's this very rich time in darkness where people actually communicate with the spiritual world in a more direct way that isn't as distracted or egotistical. And so I find that really interesting. So that's, and the great church theologians, Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross, who was one of her disciples, she talks about the interior castle and basically going through all these things to get to the center, but that's where it's dark. And then St. John of the Cross, he speaks of the dark night of the soul. And he was trying to reform his order. And of course, people never like being reformed, no matter what. And so, of course, instead of saying, well, what are we doing wrong? They threw him in prison and they put him in a cell with nothing. And so he literally had the dark night of the soul. And what he experienced through that was great blessing and great union with divinity. And some of the world's most gorgeous religious poetry and revelations came out of that. So this concept of darkness, we often say, oh, I have a, dark night, or I'm, depressed and this and that. And those are valid. That's incredibly valid. Sometimes I say, well, you're having a rational response to a very difficult situation. Of course you should be depressed. It shows that you're paying attention. But we can use these periods, and we can embrace darkness and black as an opportunity to be very receptive to divinity. So that's how I see that approach.
Yeah, so practically in today, then it's what I'm hearing is it's obviously not to avoid those quiet periods, dark periods.
Right.
Because if you even think a lot of meditation practices today, it's by closing the eyes.
Right.
Or being very still, very quiet, not moving.
Right.
So it's that going into as you say, a dark or sense-free, trying to control the senses so that something else can happen or visit. Yeah.
So it's rich.
But then what about, like, as you say, in the polarity in the world and all this pain that we see? So there's one aspect in that, in our own experience, we can go dark, embrace the dark to but we can't stay there. We have to open our eyes and deal with the world. And the world has some dark, difficult.
Right. Well, I think that's where this whole concept of transformation comes. And we find that in a lot of the mystery traditions, not only in Christianity, but also some of the ancient traditions of Persephone and Natura. And these were very much influential, the Persephone mysteries, and the Aloysian mysteries. And all of these are all about entering into the darkness and then being transformed And that's where we use the darkness. We approach it in an open way and use it as an opportunity to transform. And for anybody, and I would say everybody's suffering. I mean, it's just part of life. You know, I'm a hedonist. I really dislike suffering. and I think most of us do. But I always say, well, let's make use of this. You know, what is this trying to tell me? What is this? What can I learn from this? And anybody that has really been transformed through their inner darkness gains wisdom. And the wisdom, if you're really honest, you know, yes, you would like to have sidestepped all of that, but the wisdom that you gain is the benefit, and the suffering was the price of wisdom. And you know, I wish it was different because I'm a hedonist. I wasn't in charge of all of this, but it is one way that we have been designed, and the cosmos has been designed to make use of all of these different experiences. And there is a richness. And I remember when I was younger, and I would sit with older women, and there was this knowledge, you know, like this, but you know, they had been through childbirth and had raised children and had lost children, or had lost marriages, or lived through the death of a spouse, and all the different things that you go through as you age. But it's interesting, they have studies on this where they say, well, older people are actually more happy. It's like, because there's this knowledge that every challenge is temporary, and there's wisdom gained from it. And so you watch your younger people being very upset about very real things, very challenging things, but they don't have the wisdom to know that this is temporary and there's something actually to be gained, or you don't know what path you're supposed to take. And maybe this dark challenge, this deep depression. And I mean, most incredible works of art in terms of music and literature, and even my own book, I wrote in the depths of depression. And these works of art, you know, that's why art is so healing. And that's why in anthroposophical medical therapies, they use the arts, because it's a way of transforming these different things. So I think if we're awake and we can conceptualize darkness as something deeply mystical and deeply healing, rather than something to be avoided. The other way that we can embrace darkness is that all of life comes from darkness. Our galaxy was born out of darkness. We are conceived in darkness. Seeds germinate and spring forth underground in the darkness. And so there's this transformation that happens as a result. So that's another way we can embrace that. And it's useful for modern culture.
Yeah, so it's very much about being open to it. You touched there briefly about the medical therapy and how it uses art, and specifically the color black is involved in it. So maybe just touch.
Well, I'm so glad you asked that question, because this whole anthroposophical approach to color is that we need the polarities. So on one end of the spectrum, we have white, light, and on the other end is darkness, but in between is color. And we can't see the color unless we have both darkness and light. And in anthroposophical medical therapies, they will use traditional therapies. Let's say somebody, for instance, needs surgery for whatever reason. But then they look at the deeper aspects. They're like, okay, you need to have nutrition, you need to have exercise, you need to have these medical therapies. But what is the deeper emotional and spiritual quality to why this disease is manifested. And one of the ways of dealing with certain aspects of whatever the specific disease is through painting therapy and the use of both light and dark and colors. And what Steiner says about these different colors is that when we use black in a painting, we are working on our will, because black is the color of cosmic will, and light, white, is the color of cosmic thinking and spirit, and the color is the color of cosmic feeling. And so if somebody is having issues with their will, they'll be guided by their artistic therapist to incorporate more dark and black in their painting in order to incorporate this. And so for me, when I was trying to comprehend these dark virgins, and the Virgin Mary in art symbolically is the image of the human soul, and the Virgin Mary is the symbol of the highest potential of humanity. What is our highest potential? And her life and her deeds and her responses and all of the things that she models. And so when you look at a Madonna, you are looking at the highest potential of humanity. And so you look at these dark Madonnas, and what I am seeing when I look at them is this invitation to understand human will. How is human will in line with cosmic will? And the other thing that speaks to me, especially in these statues of these images, is the size of their hands. They're huge. If we did them to scale, their hands would basically be the size of our elbow to our fingertip. And the hands are the agents of human will. So we have this artistic image in dark with these huge hands. And this, in my opinion, my comprehension, embodies this quality of anthroposophical healing artistic therapy of working with human will. And how is it that we can align our will, like we do every time we say the Lord's Prayer, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And the human hands are the conduits of that. We balance the heavens and the earth. And we do that with our whole beings, our minds, our spirits, our souls, our feelings, and our will. But these images really speak to that. And I think it's a very interesting period of time right now, because how humans choose to use their wills. How are we choosing to use our will? How do we do that? And we are seeing the consequences of unwise use of will. But we also have incredible examples of wise and loving use of will. Incredible examples of that. And so to me, these images that are ancient and modern are these wonderful invitations from the spiritual world to use our will through this image of black and darkness to be transformed, but also to use our transformed pain in order to be loving agents in the world. That's how I see it.
Oh, I really enjoy that image. But so then my question might be then, how do we practically do that? Or like, do you have a tip or an exercise or a meditation or something that we can actually grasp? Because the role of the will is really important in how we deal with darkness, as you said, and if we are going to do that transformation.
Yes. You know, There's several wonderful, easy methods we can do this. One of them is called compassionate conversation, where you're in, and anthroposophy sees conversation as an art. It's an art. And so this compassionate conversation where we really sit with someone, either a loved one we're in harmony with or someone we're in great conflict with, and we reflect back to one another. And that can lead us into this wisdom and real understanding of what's happening so that we can get to the bottom of something. And then we can actually conceptualize how to transform the outer world, either our situation, our own personal way of being in the world, or even how we look at something. Is this a challenge? Is this the end of my world? Or is this an opportunity? And how do I use this opportunity in a moral, loving way? And another technique is called biospirituality. It's a focusing technique. That's what it's called. And you can do this with someone. Some psychotherapists use this, but you can do it on your own, or you can do it with a partner. And you basically try to feel what is a pressing issue? Like, what is something you just can't deny or distract yourself away? What is a pressing issue? And when you get to the pressing issue, then you say, where do I feel this in my body? And most of us feel things in our throat, our heart, or our tummies. And that's kind of interesting. And I feel everything in my tummy. And so then you say, well, okay, this feeling, if it could give me a story, what would it say? What would that say? Or you say, I am or I am not. And so let's say you have a challenge. Let's say your marriage is ending. Let's say, because unfortunately, many of us are experiencing things like that. And what is the most pressing issue? And it's like, well, my whole life is upside down. But it's really maybe a very big feeling of rejection. Like, I'm worthless. Nobody will love me. And where do you feel that? Oh, I feel that in my heart. And if you could talk to that, or it could tell you a story, what would it say? And it would say, I'm feeling worthless right now. And can you be with feeling that? Most people can't feel with that. Like I say, I'm a hedonist. I don't enjoy feeling like that. But if you can be with that feeling, or even well, I can't be with that right now. Can I be with the not being with it? And then there is something that shifts. And I've seen this clinically, and I've also experienced it personally. When you're able to sit with either the feeling or the issue, or not being able to feel, there's something that shifts, and then it's not so overwhelming. And then you are able to actually collaborate with the spiritual world and your own innate wisdom and higher self to say, oh, this is what I need to do. This is how I need to act. This person that's, wanting to divorce me, I'm not going to be able to change them, but I can act in a loving, kind, and responsible and mature way, and not think that I'm worthless, that this is simply our unfortunate path, unpleasant path, I think is a better word for that, an unpleasant path, but I can act in this way, and I can hear what my angel and what my guides and what divinity is trying to tell me. And then I can act, I can use my will in a loving and positive way. So that's how I deal with that, both in my own life as well as I've dealt with my clients as well.
Thank you. Very, very powerful and practical techniques, the compassionate conversations, and call it biospirituality.
Yes. Yes. It's called focusing, and it was invented by a psychologist. His name was Eugene Gendlin. And then what's so interesting is that Catholic spiritual directors, from clergy through the laity, embraced this. And they created these entire networks of people who focus, and they call it biospirituality. And the whole philosophy behind that is that we as spiritual beings embody physical bodies, and that our physical bodies are our agents of, our spiritual natures. And we have freedom, so we can act in amazing ways or horrible ways. And what they feel, and I feel, and everybody else feels, is that if we use our incredible powerful gift of freedom and align that with our hearts and our wills and collaborating with the spiritual world, then we can really we can transform. So it's incredibly powerful. And to me, anthroposophy has all kinds of marvelous, concepts and theories and things like that. And it doesn't always have to be, quote unquote, an anthroposophical therapy. It can be others, but you can see some of the anthroposophical concepts behind it. And so this physical embodiment of our spiritual nature and how to transform our wills and our thinking and our feelings, so we're not so overwhelmed and just want to sit in a corner. My drug of choice is popcorn, but other people, they do all kinds of things. And I think, at least I can say from North America and a lot of what I'm witnessing in Europe, people are just numbing themselves out with drugs, heroin. I mean, it's just horrible what's going on. And it's very rational. They're in pain and they don't know what to do with that. And it's just easier to numb yourself. But that's not contributing to anything at all, except the bank accounts of, drug dealers and rehabilitation centers. But other than that, I mean, and these are simple techniques of aligning ourselves and our spirits to transform cosmic will into human will in loving and profound and healthy ways. So, yeah.
I think that's the theme that's what you've shared today is that how do we be with darkness so we can transform it into a compassionate will approach to actually try and make a difference, not only in our lives, but in the world today.
It's true. It's totally true. We're all mini cosmos. And it's very evident we don't have a whole lot of control on all outside events, but we do have control over ourselves. And the more that we transform, that was why in the ancient mystic traditions, and it didn't matter what tradition you were from, they had a group of people that just sat and meditated and prayed. And it's like, well, is that a way to engage in the world? And it's like, well, they're doing their part. And we can't all be in monasteries, but we can use darkness both as a time of day and our own internal darkness as an invitation to wholeness and transformation. And that is truly how we do change the world, I believe. And I think that's a lot of what anthroposophy is looking at. And that's why I embrace all of this, because I am a healer by profession and vocation, and healing is just a great thing to do.
And so needed.
Yes.
It really how can people get hold of you if they want to find out more about your books, about you, about your work, if they want you to come speak?
Sure. I have a podcast, and I do talk about a lot of these themes, and it's called The Black Madonna Speaks. And I can say with great gratitude, I have a lovely following in South Africa. And it can be found on Apple Podcasts, on Google Play, and on Spotify. And so that's a way to be in with me. And then I have a Facebook page, which is called The Heart of the Black Madonna. And then I have an Instagram, which is The Black Madonna Speaks. And so those are the best places to keep in touch with me.
Great. And I'll have links in the show notes.
Right.
And yes, we have an upcoming talk here in South Africa.
Yes.
9th of September, you're going to be joining us, the Anthroposophy Society in Johannesburg, and sharing a lovely talk called the Activities of the Apocalypse.
Yes, Activities for the Apocalypse.
that link you can find on our website for more information. So maybe in closing, if you've got any other remarks, but I usually end up with this question, like, with us being informed from anthroposophy, what do you see is our task as human beings as we go into the future?
I think our task is to gain wisdom and gain knowledge, and use that wisdom in loving ways. I think that's our task. Yeah, that's what I occupy myself with every day. And I'm not always very good at it, but at least I try. And so I really feel that is our task as humans.
Great. Well, it's been lovely having an anthroposophical conversation with you. Thanks so much.
I'm so honored to be here.
This has been Anthroposophical Conversations. Please follow us on your favorite podcast channels. And also you can find out more on our website, anthro-jhb.org.za/podcast.
Thank you for joining us on this insightful adventure. We look forward to welcoming you to Anthroposophical Conversations, where together we will unlock timeless wisdom and discover new horizons of understanding. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes as we unravel the secrets of the human experience and delve into the extraordinary world of Rudolf Steiner's Anthroposophy.